welcome back to another episode of Creative Writing Advice with me, JJ Barnes. If you don't know me, I'm the author of How to Write a Story, which you can get in paperback or in PDF, Kindle or ebook version. And yeah, I hope that this book will inspire you and give you the confidence that you need to get your story out into the world. This is what I'm over here on YouTube doing as well. I am trying to do videos every week where I take different subjects to do with writing, tips, tricks, techniques, writing hacks, whatever, and break them down and make them accessible to you so that you can use them in your own story. And yeah, I just want to get more stories out into the world, and that's what I'm trying to do over here. So today's video is all about how to name your characters. Because it might seem like a really easy subject. You just, I like the name Sally, my character is named Sally. Which is fine as an approach for naming your characters, but there is certain things that you need to take into account when you're coming up with your character names. For instance, what time period is your story set in? Because if you are writing a historical story and you call your character a modern name, it's going to stand out, especially to people who are particular fans of the genre of historical stories, because they're going to know that the person who wrote this isn't really familiar with the time that they are writing about, and that they haven't bothered to do any research. And you kind of immediately setting your audience off on the wrong foot. They're going to be on edge because you've got a character named Kylie, which is a modern name, in a story set in like the 1600s, when she should be called, I don't know, Mabel. We actually don't know what a name from the 1600s is, but that's why I would need to do research. So when is your story set? You need to look at the time period, look up names. Now, it doesn't have to be the most popular name for the period. In fact, it probably shouldn't, because that, again, it looks a bit too easy. So look into the area you're writing about, because especially at that like olden times, areas were much more cut off from one another because travel was so much harder. So different areas would have very different little microcultures within a country. So look at the area you're writing in, look at the time period, and look at names that were given in that time. You can pick one you like, it doesn't matter, why you like it, but just try and stick to the correct time period, because it will affect your story and your audience's experience. The next thing to think about, do you want to give your characters a name with real meaning? Because you can research the history of a name, characters from time that have had that name, or words that are similar to that name that have serious meaning, or just the old-fashioned root meaning of a name, and make sure that it's representative of your character. You do not have to do this. Not every writer does it, and it's more suited to fiction. It's more suited to fantasy and urban fantasy stories, purely because meaning of, you've got crystals and herbs and spells and potions and magic, and the root meaning of names is more likely to play into that kind of world, because that's all about spells and magic and history. So if you're writing a fantasy or urban fantasy, it's more likely to be, but it can be any story, because especially if you've got an audience who's passionate and cares about your story, they are going to want to know all of this stuff and research your characters and the names, and it can add like a really fantastic experience for the mega fans of your story if they can go and see all the way through that you have layered that character has the name that told you so much about them. And it's a really interesting little part. J.K. Rowling does this a lot. If you look at the meanings of the names of the characters in the Harry Potter series, there's all sorts of things that you can look at and find, and it's really interesting and a really clever tool to use. A third point, how is the name said? Now, I am not in any way suggesting that if you have a Gaelic name or a Russian name that you need to anglicize it. You don't have to do that, because those names exist, and we English people, I'm assuming you're English because you're watching, or at least an English speaker because you're watching me who is English talking about this, but you could be anywhere, and it's probably true of your country too. If you change the name of a character who is from Russia and make it an English version of the name so that it's easier to pronounce for your English-speaking readers, it's kind of erasing a culture, and I don't think you should do that. Like, it's great that we have so many cultures and so many different names in our world. But my point really comes down to when it's a fantasy story. If you are creating a name which is very popular in especially high fantasy, you're creating a name, something really unusual and striking, and creating a new culture, and therefore creating names for within that new culture. I see this quite a lot, and I'm like, that's just a complete mess of letters. And every time I try and read that name, I'm like, I have to try and sort of create a sound in my head that I think is vaguely familiar, and you can't research it. Like, if I read a foreign name that isn't my language, I can just go on Google and find the pronunciation for it, and I'm like, right, bam, I can hear that in my head every time then, because I'm familiar then with the name and the correct way of saying it. But if you're creating a name and there is no way to find out the correct pronunciation of it, and it is just, you've got, I know, like, just symbols as part of it, and every single time your audience is going to be a bit booted out of your story because they're trying desperately in their head to make sense of what this word is that they're told is the name of a character. Basically, don't make it so hard for your audience to connect with that person because they can't work out what the sound of their name is. It might sound silly, and you might love a really elaborate name and like really enjoy it, but you're gonna boot people out, basically. And your job as the writer is to keep people hooked within your story. You want them to get lost in it. And every time they get booted outside of your story because they're trying to work out what a word is, the name of a character that appears over and over again, and they're getting more frustrated because they can't work out how they're supposed to say it, every single time they're booted out of your story, you've lost them a little bit, and it's easier for them not to bother coming back. You want them to feel hooked. You want it to be consuming for them so that when they're lost in your book, they're literally lost. The world has gone away, and your book is everything at that moment. They are in it, they're entrenched in it, they're living it with your protagonist. And every time they're booted out and they have to fight their way back in, you've lost them a little bit. Just a little bit. And you'll lose them a little bit more each time. So you can come up with fantastical, unusual, beautiful sounding names. But say it out loud yourself. Look at those letters that you've put down. Try and look at it as somebody new. Is it easy enough to make a sound that's easy to say from those letters? And if it is, you're fine. You can make up any word you want to be a name. Really doesn't matter. But try saying it out loud. Maybe give it to your partner or a friend and be like, what do you think that name is? And if they're just like, blah, 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 like, maybe rethink it. Even if you love it, rethink it, because your audience is part of this story and you don't want to boot them out. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope you feel able to go into naming your characters now more confidently. Yeah, where are they from? What time is it set? Is it easy to pronounce? Does it have a deeper meaning? Because it will affect your audience's experiences and the authenticity of your story. Thank you very much. If you have any advice on how to name your characters, or want to share your experience of how you chose your characters' names, I would love to hear about it, because there's always more that can be said on any of these subjects, and I think that it's fun to share how we've chosen our names because we can all learn from one another. So either drop a comment down here and tell me all about it, and then we can talk about how names have been picked, and I think that's a really interesting conversation. Also, you can find me on social media. If you go to my website, which is jjbarnes.co.uk, you can find all my links over there. Come chat to me. If you want to ask me any questions or talk about any writing subjects, I am there, and I always love to hear from people. What else? Oh, subscribe to this channel. I put out a video every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, and other stuff goes out too. My focus is usually on stories and writing, and yeah, I'll love to see you again soon. So thank you very much. Bye.